Hey guys, welcome back to another video. In this video, we're going to be working with Leetcode problem number 26, where we have to remove duplicates from a sorted array. And so it's pretty self-explanatory. All we want to do is if we're given an array, a sorted array with different duplicates, we have multiple cases of 1. In this case, we have multiple cases of 1, 2, and 3, and 0. We want to remove those duplicates in constant memory, which means we're not creating a new array, we're working within the array that we have. And once we remove those duplicates, our array is only going to hold the unique values, and we're going to return the length of our array, which in this case is going to be 5, in this case will be 2. And so that's the gist of the problem that we're working with. I've already gone ahead and created the Google Doc, and we can start working. And so the first thing I want to do, I'm going to first declare an index variable called 0, which I want to keep that because I'm looping through the array, so I want to make sure I know which index that I'm on. And what I want to do is, the first thing I want to do, I want to loop through the whole array until the very last number. And so I'm going to say while idx is less than length nums. And so that's going to make sure our index is never equal to the length of nums, but is always less than it. And once we get to a point where it's equal to the length of nums, that means we've gone past we've gone through all the values of the array, and we no longer need to traverse through the array because we've already done traversing it. And so now what I want to say, I want to create another while loop, and what this while loop is going to check, this while loop is going to check if the current value is equal to the value after, and if it is, we're going to use the Python's .remove method to remove the first instance of that value from the array. And so what I mean by that is, if we're given the example 1, 1, 2, in our first iteration, our idx is 0, and so that means we're currently on this one. If we're on this one, we're going to be checking if the value at this index is equal to the value at the next index. If it is, we're going to use the .remove method and pass in the value of the value at the current index. And what that's going to do, that's going to here I'll do nums.remove. That's going to remove the first instance of the value of the parameter that we pass in, or the value that we pass in. So in this case, it's going to remove the first one, and in the end, we're going to get 1, 2. And so that's what this one .remove method will do. And say we have another example with 1, 1, 2. In this case, it would remove the first instance. That means we'd have 2 1s left and then a 2. And what we want to do is, in the while loop, we don't want to increment our index just yet because we've already moved all our values down. They've all moved down one index. And so if we keep the index the same, we can continuously check our current value with the next one until we get to a point where our current value is not equal to the next value, because once we get to that point, we can just increment our index then. If we increment it before, that means you're going to be skipping values. And not to mention, if we do it this way, if you'll notice, once we remove this index, we're basically looking at this array. And so over here, when in this array, our index 0 was this one, when we're looking at the remainder of this array here, our index 0 is going to be this, it's going to be that one that I've highlighted there. And so in this case, we're going to be checking this one with this one afterwards. And so the whole point of that, we can, if we don't increment our index, we can keep checking our value with the next one until we get to a point that we see we don't have a duplicate. And so hopefully that makes sense. How I can do that is, the first thing I want to make sure is that we have a number to check with. Our next index is something that we can check with. And so I'm going to say while index plus 1 is less than the length of nums. So that avoids any out of bounds errors that we may have. And then I'm going to say, I'm going to do the actual check. While idx plus 1 is less than the length of nums, and it's equal to the value to the next value. If that's the case, we're just going to remove our nums idx. And so that's going to remove the first instance that we have of that current value, and that's fine because we already have a duplicate, so we can remove the current instance that we're on. And so that's going to move our whole array down, which is why we don't increment our index. And so once we've done that and we've gone to the point where one of these fails, we'll simply increment our index by 1. so that in this case, after we remove our next one here, we'd be left with 1, 2, and that means we'd still be on index 0, and we'd want to increment our index to 2, or to 1, so that we can look at the value of 2. And so that's the whole point here. And even if we get to a point where this fails, incrementing our index will it will cause this while loop to fail, and then at the very end we can return the length of our nums. And so one thing I do want to mention also, just to prove why this would work, if we're at a point where we're at say something like 1, 2, and no, well, let's just say we're at the 2. So say we have an array of 1, value 2. Our index here is 0. Our IDX is 0, and our length of nums is 1. And so we see that our index plus 1 would be equal to length of nums. And so that means that this test here would fail. And if that's also the case, we can increment index by 1, so that now our index would be equal to 1. And when we do this check over here, it would actually be equal to the length of nums, which would fail this check for the while loop. And once we've done that, then we can return the length of nums because we've gone through the whole array. And so that is the point of the while loop, or how we handle with the while loop. And now all I'm going to do, I'm just going to copy the code in, and we'll run it after. So while idx is less than length of nums, while idx plus 1 is less than length of nums, and nums idx is equal to nums idx plus 1, nums.move nums idx, we'll increment our idx by 1 and return the length of our nums. And so that should be everything that we wrote, and it is, I believe, yeah. And so I'm going to run the test case that they gave here, this one here, and we get the right output, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, or we return like they have that output there. And I'll run the other test case. And so that one works as well. And so now I'm just going to submit, and hopefully this test will pass all the tests. And so it does. And that's how we can code the removing duplicate function in the Leetcode problem. Hopefully this helps you guys, and see you guys in the next one. All right, later.